À la dérive sur l'océan Pacifique pendant un an, il est finalement rentré chez lui, au Salvador. José Salvador Alvarenga, un pêcheur de requins, était tellement ému et sous le choc qu'il n'a pu dire un mot à la presse à son arrivée dans sa patrie. L'homme de 37 ans affirme s'être perdu en mer en décembre 2012 et avoir dérivé depuis, mangeant du sang de tortues, des oiseaux et des poissons pêchés à main nue. Il s'est échoué le 30 janvier sur les îles Marshall, à 12 500 km de son point de départ.
Well, Elizabeth I followed her father Henry VIII. So what happened to the Lombards during her reign?
Well, it appears that they had got their feet under the table during the reign of Henry, and they created what we now call the British East India Company, and that was their first huge step forward. And this company meant tremendous growth around the world, and eventually the company controlled the lives of about a fifth of the world's population. So what we see in the reign of Elizabeth I, and again she was very loyal to our country, but nevertheless this system had got somehow under the surface of everything. And we see the East India Company emerging, and with that comes the takeover of the British establishment, the control of our armed forces, the control through intelligence services which were run from Switzerland, from Geneva, the Royal Society which came directly from this Lombard period, control of the banks, and then an attempted control of the monarchy. So if we take the banks, first of all, we now have a Bank of England which has been a tremendous servant to the nation. That doesn't stop us saying, however, that when it began, it was founded by the Lombards. They moved their banking arrangements to Geneva, then to Holland, and then across the Channel to England. And when the bank was opened, it was opened by 7 bankers, which is quite significant in some ways, because we'll mention that again. They introduced into our country the first issues of paper money, and with that came a national debt. So in 4 years the debt rose from 1.6 million to approximately 16 million, which of course in those days was pretty disastrous. So what we begin to see is the gradual takeover of the nation, and it's worth knowing that these bankers, just like ivy creeps somewhere, found their way into just about every aspect of the nation, including into the big houses and into society in general.
Going back to the East India Company, many people think of this as a Victorian setup, but you're saying that it actually goes back to Elizabeth I. So can you fill us in on the origins of this organisation?
Well, yes, I can. We're talking about a financial invasion of just about everything you can think about, from banks to royalty to everything. In 1581, the Venetian Turkey Company was prospering overseas, and this merged and became the Levant Company, which later became the infamous British East India Company in 1600. The first governor of the East India Company was Thomas Smythe, who was trained in Venice and studied law in Padua. In short, he was a Venetian agent, and the East India Company was only an extension of the Levant Empire.
So was our military used to gain land and assets for the East India Company rather than actually serving the national interest?
Well, the East India Company was allowed to produce its own army and navy, and did so, and the result was an army and navy rather larger than the one that belonged to Britain. But just as there were many very good people attached to the British East India Company and many loyal people, so this subversion went right the way through into the Foreign Office, which they largely controlled, as I say, into the intelligence services. So yes, effectively, we had an army and a navy that was working for the bankers who enjoyed looting and enslaving and opium dealing, and we're not really dealing with anything very honourable.